I feel guilty because I am not great at this. And one of the things that Lencioni has said is the working genius gives us permission to not be great at things as well too. Welcome to the Consultant and the Coach podcast. I'm here with my good friend Josh. How are you?
Doing great. How are you?
Great. We've had amazing weekends. We've had some really good insights on everything from life to work. And we just had a great weekend, didn't we?
Yeah, I got to ride in a car for 6 hours, including with your son,
with my
son and another friend. So that was
we practiced,
that was insightful.
We practice what we preach. That is not what this podcast is about. I don't want to hear about my insight.
Life applications. Life applications.
Okay, well, we can go into that if we'd like to. But hey, this is part 3 of a 4-part series on Lencioni's 6 types of working genius on life application. And devotional for this morning, or for today, is out of Proverbs chapter 20, verse 5. The purpose in a man's heart is like deep water, but a man of understanding will draw it out.
Yep.
And what we're doing here with working genius is, as we see in Proverbs, we want to draw out what is in our heart. How has God made us? And it's not just, hey, just do it to do it. No, He made you a certain way. He made me a certain way. We're both married. We have kids. And we want to draw out how God has created those around us for His glory. And that's where we're going today.
Right.
So today, as life application of the 6 types of working genius in life, where do you go first, Josh, when you think of yourself or your family or those you're around?
I think, there's the book has a few good examples about facilitating conversations in church, for example, in service. I think there's also good applications to our family, trying to set up our marriages and our families for success. Another one I thought of, and you and I like this one, hopefully our audience does too, because we always come back to it, but it'd be really interesting, like, if you were going to build a good running team, right? Or pick a team, basketball, football, and you were going to try to figure out how to apply the working genius to a team, like setting aside the fact that obviously in running, for example, you need the fastest runners. In football, you need like the biggest, strongest people. Is there a synergy you somehow can create by combining those giftings differently with like a running team?
Absolutely. Yeah. So pick your team. Yeah. You need to let's do something easy. Let's do basketball. Typically in basketball, you got your guards, forwards, and center.
Yep.
You have 3. And granted, I'm not going to get into fine details, but basically your big men are your centers because they're taking up space in the paint, whereas your point guards tend to be shorter, quicker. Now, there's always exceptions to the rules. Same thing with working genius in our life. And so, for example, we're talking life application this morning. I was having a great conversation with my wife on this because we're literally using this in our life now and saying, okay, what is our genius? What is our competency? And what is our frustration? So literally my conversation as this relates to my spouse is, what can we outsource? That is her frustration, my frustration. And because she's like, well, we were talking about this and she's like, well, there are 6 types, Erik. At best, if we happen to have the same 2 on each way, that's still 2 deficiencies. So in any relationship, there's always going to be an area of deficiency where you'll either be in competency or we're forced to work in our frustration. What do you do?
Right. Yeah, no, I think it's the same for a lot of these, and I'm not going to comment too much on mine, mostly because that'll be our next episode. But I think that'll be a chance to get into those, and I think I share that observation, and I'm going to give some thoughts on that one, just of my own life and how that fits. But I do think, I wonder if you think about, going back to the basketball analogy, if you're putting together a team, right? I mean, if you're thinking about your center as like the finisher, right? Then you want someone who's like that tenacity mindset, right? Like they want to be right? Versus like your guard is like the creative type, like they're the ones who are inventing, as they go. And, maybe your forwards or some other aspect of the working genius. I was just trying to decide, how do you apply that to sports, right? And building teams. And, like we talked about a lot about the importance of, belonging to a team. And a lot of the other soft things that you're trying to teach kids beyond just the mechanics of whatever the sport is, right? And is there a way to sort of draw out of them their best by helping them not necessarily understand their working genius, but you sort of put them in a position to succeed if you knew what their working genius was.
Well, and one of the things that Lencioni has said, and it's in the book, but I've also heard him say this in his podcast, is the working genius gives us permission to not be great at things as well, too. Mm-hmm. And so what I've heard is, and I was talking to a team member at work last week, and they were just saying, this is really cool. They said, I feel guilty because I am not great at this. Now, that was nothing I put on them, but they flat out just told me, I feel guilty because I don't feel good at this. Well, what that means is that's an area of frustration for them. We can beat them up over that, or we can say, yeah, that's not your sweet spot. You're in football, you are 6'6", 340 pounds, and you want to be a speedy wide receiver. Right. God did not make you that way.
He's just not who you are.
No. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And it gives us the permission if someone is not great in something. Now, there is a time an offensive guard needs to run downfield and block, but they cannot do that every single play. That's on exception. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what the working genius does. And one of the things that you've said many times already is we still have to work on our areas of frustration. There is a time to get your licks in and to figure some things out. Because if we were just to say, okay, 16-year-old Johnny, let's figure out your working genius and never hang out in your frustration. There is a time to work out in those areas, to learn about yourself.
Right, absolutely. No, and I think probably, the working frustration, one, you don't fully understand it till you experience it many times, right? So you don't fully understand what that even looks like. The other thing, again, trying to stay out of my own specific assessment, but I think one of the things I was struck by both in the reading of the book and taking the assessment is I might answer questions differently depending on the place I'm at. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't actually sure how widely applicable the working genius was, right?
Okay.
Like, so there's certain aspects of working genius that, I can see apply to aspects of my work, but then I don't like to do them at home, and vice versa. Like, there's certain roles. Like, one of the things I've had to learn to do, and some of this maybe it just makes my working genius more complex to work out, but growing up, we talked a lot about a number of aspects of both of our childhoods, but one of the things as I've reflected on this is growing up, I had to learn to adapt to different situations kind of growing up in terms of lots of things in childhood, but then those things sort of applied to, because I had to sort of operate above my station as a 6 or 8 year old, had to sort of be more of an adult in the house for lots of reasons. And I learned early on how to adapt to a situation. So let me give you a quick example. I went, when I was 18, spent the summer in Ocean City, Maryland, working with the church on a bunch of cool beach ministry work. It was pretty fun. But I remember, because I was on the West Coast school schedule and everyone else was on the East Coast school schedule, I was a few days late, which wasn't a big deal in the grand scheme, and they were happy to have me. But the team of 8-9 of us who ran kind of the ministry for the summer, because then we'd have youth groups come for a week at a time, and we were there the whole summer. And we'd sort of manage 80 to 120 youth group members through sort of the weekly stuff. And we were sort of the anchor people who were there all summer. Anyhow, it was interesting. I showed up, and they had already obviously built quite a bit of team cohesion in 4 or 5 days of being with each other 24 hours a day nonstop, and they're picking me up from the airport. And, it's sort of exciting because you're meeting new people and you don't know what you're stepping into, and it's kind of a big leap of faith to fly across the country and show up. And I remember they said, wow, great, Josh, we're so glad you're here. We've got a great team, and we would like you to, we really are hoping that you are able to play the guitar, lead our music ministry, and that you love basketball and would like to lead our basketball ministry. And if you've met me, I'm 5'6", I'm terrible at basketball, and at the time I didn't know how to play guitar. And I went, yep, I can do both, no problem.
So you volunteered.
And so I led the basketball ministry, and I learned how to play guitar.
I did not know that about you, man.
That's the summer I learned. I haven't played in a long time. I still have it at home. My kids like it when I take it out. But point being, the working genius was funny to me because I'm not sure that the working geniuses I have, at least, apply to every scenario, because
That's a good
I've
one.
learned to adapt. I don't know what I'm better at. I don't know if I'm better at a couple of key geniuses, or I'm better at being able to cover for said frustrations and competencies by showing up and being the thing that a group needs better. Because as a consultant, what I'm able to do is I can come in and you say, well, we need this. Great.
Yeah,
I can say yes.
Here's your statement.
And then I
of
go
work.
back to my whiteboard and I go, oh shoot, how am I going to do this?
But I think
And I figure it out as part of invention.
But the working genius would say, Josh, of these 6, what do you want to do? What are your 2 favorite areas that just cause you to light up in a good way?
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's where, I'd be curious how other people, as this sort of rolls out, people to be using this. It'd be interesting to see how people apply these things to different scenarios in their life. Because even just some of the questions in the assessment, I thought to myself, well, if I'm at home, I answer it one way. If I'm with my church, I might answer it a different way. If I'm at work, I answer it a different way. I'm here with you, I might answer it a different way. So I wasn't sure if that was a criticism of the working genius, a reflection of my geniuses I wasn't understanding, or just the fact that obviously is, in the first podcast I gave it a C-. It's narrow in its application to some degree, right? As well, it's not a comprehensive solution.
So let me give you my life application. Yeah. So this is not deep, but it is deep when you think about it. So this weekend I'm painting a room in our house.
Okay.
And finished it last night, and everything was over. And one of the things I love to do when a project's over, I'm sitting in the room in my house. I used to be a commercial painter, so I was admiring my work, but I just sat down like, man, this looks good. And I just sat there and looking at it and looking at all the corners and what I could have done differently, but it wasn't in like an overanalyzing way. It was wonder is what it was. Oh man, this, and I do this with a lot of people. When a project is done, I just love looking at it. So for me, the working genius of wonder, I love doing that. And it was one of those things. It was at my house, and I just sat there and wondered. And then another thing is I was then walking through my house and like, okay, I would love to eventually push this wall out. And when we remodel our house, this is what I want to do. And then I was like, what am I doing? Invention. Because I was working on the podcast in my head. What do I love to do in my own personal life?
Yeah.
So that's how life application. I'm not going to be a professional painter ever again, hopefully. But I love to wonder and invent things.
Yeah.
But if you ask me, hey, Erik, galvanize the kids. Now, galvanizing is my working frustration. That just sounds horrible. And even when
you run a cross-country program with 100 kids and all their families?
I do.
That's
and
very galvanizing.
It can be. And I figured out a way around that.
I'm going to figure out how to get you off that.
But I've already fixed it.
Oh, you have? Okay, good.
Yeah, and I have a coach that has been recruited. And I have enabled her, and she is one of the most galvanizing people you know.
Great.
And she's in charge of all the 8 and unders.
Oh, I know.
And you know who I'm talking about. But this is where
she is great.
I am so low at galvanizing. But here I have a coach who's onto our team. I mean, she leads middle school youth group. She has the gift of galvanizing. And she loves doing this.
She does. She's really good at it.
So what have I done? Please take this, coach. It is all yours. And so in life, that is something I'm not good at galvanizing. I don't want to galvanize. I want to write workouts. I want to wonder. I want to invent things. And the galvanizing part of like hurting 8-year-olds and 7-year-olds, that is all hers.
So remind me where tenacity fell in yours.
That's also at the bottom.
So here's another way I struggle with genius then. Is the way you described how you felt after you completed the room.
Wonder.
See, that's not tenacity. See, tenacity would suggest that you actually took great joy in completing the project, and it sounded like that's what you were feeling. You were feeling this sense of like completeness.
No. So here with tenacity is the ability to finish it.
Right.
That is not my gift.
So finishing it you did not enjoy.
Oh, not at all. I
okay.
hated every bit. Now I finished it because I can't move furniture until it's done, and it was done at 9:15 last night.
We had a yard project last night.
So understanding tenacity is like, okay, I've learned to accommodate for my areas of frustration by putting in false deadlines. I mean, it was my own personal, project besides my wife looking at me. I'm like, you really didn't finish it again? But other than that, there were no consequences if I didn't finish the project. But once it was done, then I hung out in the wonder.
Got it. So
even in my coaching, one of the things that's I don't have the gift of tenacity. Now, there are certain deadlines for every race. There is a race deadline. Everyone needs to be entered by 9 p.m. on Thursday.
Right.
Forces me to get things done. Doesn't mean I like it. The person with the gift of tenacity would be my wife. Something's due on Sunday. She has it done by Wednesday. Really? Why would you do something that early? But she has the gift of tenacity.
Right.
It's great. And so I think a lot of it's just understanding where we fall into it. And in our house, just because it's an area of frustration with tenacity does not mean I can ignore it. So someone's like, oh, this is my only genius. I'm only going to do these two things. Maybe if you're as rich as like a Jeff Bezos or Bill Gates or you name it, then you can just say, I'm only going to do these two things.
I don't know. Life has a way of giving you all six, whether you like it or not.
That's true, because even with them, they might say in business, I'm going to do all this. Their spouses left both of them as well.
Well, I was going to say they failed in some aspect of
absolutely, because they ignored that area. So we do have to do all six in life.
Yeah.
Our kids have to do all six in life.
Yeah.
But I think we can hang out in our areas of giftedness more than our areas of frustration.
So what do you think about childhood? So I think about childhood as a period in life where effectively you're learning to wonder and invent. Everybody.
We should. Absolutely.
Right? So I guess, how do you think about kids and enabling them around these in light of the fact that generally we tend to, are we viewing childhood too myopically, if we're sort of viewing childhood as a space to wonder and invent, if there are kids who have that as a frustration that develops later on, or does that develop later on because of some other things that we're not doing correctly in childhood? Like which comes first?
I think with our kids, both. I mean, you have 3 kids, I have 4.
Yeah.
Our role as parents is we need to give our kids all 6.
Okay. So expose them to all 6.
Oh, absolutely.
Let them get frustrated. Let them,
Absolutely. And so, for example, even wonder, at church, our kids should learn to glory in the at God and the Creator. How to teach them wonder, but also invention. Hey, you have a problem here. What's a way around this? Discernment. Good versus evil. I have one of my kids does not have the gift of discernment. Hands down. Love her to death.
Not yet.
Thoroughly naive.
Not yet. That's a life experience thing. So maybe that's discernment. It's life experience.
Well, she's going to have to get a little bit of it.
Yeah. Well, whether you help her. Life's going to find it for her. Don't worry.
It will.
Yeah.
But galvanizing, there comes a point to galvanize someone. Another one of my kids out of the room has the gift of galvanizing. I'm just like, oh my, doesn't even have to try. And she's recruited 10 kids to youth group, another 5 kids to the cross country team.
Right.
She so has the gift of, like, if she were to get a hold of you, you would not realize it, but you like to play with, as a kid, you like to play with Barbies too, even though you're an older man. Like, I didn't realize this, because she galvanized you.
She shows you how great it is. I know which one of your kids you're talking about too. I think my middle son's that way too, because he was funny.
Yes, he does.
Yesterday at church, they announced a cider press, which is coming up this week, which is really cool. Anyhow, and the pastor, as he should, said, hey, invite your friends, right? And he's thinking like adults, invite your family friends, and he immediately rattles off like 2 or 3 friends he wants to invite. And I was like, yeah, okay, we could talk about it afterwards. And he's like, no, but I wanted I'm not inviting him right now. We're in the middle of the service. But we could talk about it later. But he was all in on inviting his friends and galvanizing people around this event. So,
and so of my kids, one of my kids has the gift of enablement. Didn't get that from me, but she totally has that gift. And my other kid, who's now in college, she has, you wouldn't think of it, but she thoroughly has the gift of tenacity. She just always gets things done and finishes it.
She is like your wife.
Oh, yes, she thoroughly gets that from her, saying, Yes, that is why you were valedictorian. Yes, that is why you have a 4.0. Because I got to the point where I'm like, okay, this is good enough. A 3.8 is going to get me into whatever college I want to.
Sure.
That's good.
It's good.
I
You
racked
got
it
what
on
you needed. Yep.
where she was like, no, I've got to finish it. I've got to have the A, 93% or above. And this is understanding. This is how our kids are. Or this is the life application. I love this about the Working Genius.
Yeah, and I think it does bring a simpler explanation for parents and how to sort of recognize and expose your kids to all the different types, right? And then you begin and actually learn about your kids, therefore you can help them learn about themselves, right? It's back to this, draw out of deep water. Well, I think the scripture we read today, basically parents are sort of the first ones to help us, should be the ones to help us sort of expose and draw that out, right? Because we help see, like, look, you're really good at this, you're not so good at this. And I know that's one of the things as parents we struggle with is trying to help our kids believe that they're loved equally and parented differently, right? And holding that intention.
Yeah, that is good.
Right, it's hard.
And
it's hard to hold that intention. But this Working Genius, gives one of probably several tools you could use to help at least show that your kids how they're different and to appreciate those differences, right? And that it's okay that one is really, gifted in this way and one's gifted in this way.
And we do a disservice to our kids as well as our workers if we say everyone has to be the same.
Right.
No, we don't.
Yeah, no.
We were created thoroughly differently.
Right,
And this is where, obviously, I have 4 kids. Same 4 kids came from the same mom and the same dad. This is what's fascinating.
Yeah.
Is you would think with genetics we'd be a little bit more similar. But, go back to biology, how you can mix and match chromosomes and all sorts of other things, or genes, not chromosomes, genes. We have 4 very, very different kids, which is beautiful. That's how God created us to complement one another.
Yeah.
And this is why we're not meant to do life alone. We're not meant to do family alone. We're not meant to do church alone.
Yeah.
We're meant to do it together, and that's the beauty of the Working Genius.
Yep. No, I think it is a good tool for helping to have these hard conversations, complex conversations.
Oh, yes.
Family and service and community. So I think it's great. I think next up, right? We're
Next
gonna
up
talk
is
about,
you.
Me, right?
Are you
Okay.
ready to dial down on
So,
Josh's Working Genius?
next time?
And I'm gonna
None of it will
pester
surprise you, by the way. We've already talked about it.
I don't know. I think some will. You might even surprise yourself.
A little bit.
But that's next week and next podcast.
Sounds good.
So until then, go to theconsultantthecoach.com. If you're listening to this on either YouTube or TikTok or any other of those, do us a favor. Leave us a 5-star review, thumbs up, subscribe. That really helps get the podcast out to others. But until then, thanks for listening to The Consultant and the Coach.
Sounds good.